As mentioned by Amalina, my name is Joshua. I work with UNHCR, and my focus of my work is on child protection and gender-based violence. I am now going to turn off my camera for the remainder of this session. So thank you very much for taking your time this morning to come here to maybe learn a little bit about what gender-based violence is. We will begin by maybe talking about what is the definition of gender-based violence, what we understand by gender-based violence. We will have some examples. We will then look into what kind of support is provided to victims or survivors of gender-based violence. And then we will also share what are there any UNHCR partners that work on gender-based violence and how you can reach them. And finally, if there are gender-based violence victims who you know or who approach you, what is it that you can do? But let's begin by talking about the definitions. So what is gender-based violence? Now, for a lot of people, when we talk about gender-based violence, we tend to look into the examples of it, right, or the types of gender-based violence. People think gender-based violence is domestic violence or gender-based violence is rape. But when we drill down into it, gender-based violence, by definition, is or refers to harmful acts that are directed at an individual based on their gender. It means that the reason why the violence is inflicted upon a person is because of their gender or their gender identity. And the root of it is most people might say that the root of gender-based violence might be because the person doing it is somebody who is hot-headed, or because of alcohol, right? Or because of maybe their socio-economic background. Maybe stress is the cause of gender-based violence. Um, but if we look into the actual roots of it, the reason why gender-based violence happens is because of gender inequality. And what do we mean by gender inequality? Gender inequality is the power difference that exists within our society, within our communities, between people of different genders. Um, Usually, or broadly speaking, in most communities, men or boys hold more power than women and girls, and that creates a form of gender inequality where men and boys have more opportunities, have more privileges, and because of that, because of this gender inequality and the power inequality, when abuse of power happens, or when harmful norms are put forward, such as that men are powerful, men can take what they want, or women are supposed to listen to men, or women have to do whatever it is that men want. This kind of harmful norms and this abuse of the power imbalance that exists is what causes gender-based violence to happen. Now, gender-based violence is a serious violation of human rights, and it is also a life-threatening health and protection issue. So while you might not be aware of gender-based violence that has occurred within your community, what we can see from UNHCR's perspective is that gender-based violence is something that is prevalent, something that occurs, and within the communities that we work in, and it's one that causes a severe damage and harm, especially to those who suffer from it, which disproportionately or a large number of are women and girls. Now, I'm going to go into what are the core types of gender-based violence before I give you some examples. There are 5 core types of gender-based violence. And the first one that usually comes to mind for people is physical violence, an act where the perpetrator or the person who causes the harm is hitting or kicking or doing some sort of action that physically harms the victim. Another type of gender-based violence, and maybe one that is not talked about too often, is psychological or emotional violence. So you can imagine a situation where a person might not inflict damage or harm to another person because of physical acts, but it is done through their words or through their actions that causes psychological or emotional harm to the victim. There is also what is known as economic violence, which is the denial of resources, opportunities, or services. Now, what would that look like? It could be, for example, that if a wife and goes out and works and comes back and she has this her earnings, and the husband is the one that controls all of the earnings, does not allow the wife to have any money, or does not, or only provides her with very little money when she has in fact earned a certain amount of money. Or it could be where different opportunities are denied them, where women um, are forbidden from working when they do want to work. That can be viewed as a form of economic violence. There's also sexual violence, and then there is forced marriage. So if we look into these five core types, and maybe we can have some examples of it, you will see here that there are examples of physical or psychological, economic, sexual, and forced marriage can include domestic violence. So in domestic violence, where the violence is inflicted upon family member to other family member. Now, usually when we think of domestic violence, most people think about it as being a husband hitting his wife. Um, that is a type of domestic violence, but it can also include grandparents hitting grandchildren, wife hitting husband, that does occur as well, or even any violence that occurs within the family. But specifically, when we talk about gender-based violence, remember at the top when we say talk about the definition of gender-based violence, for domestic violence to fall under gender-based violence, it will have to be that the violence is inflicted upon a person because of their gender. So let me give you an example of what that would look like for domestic violence. It could be where a husband hits his wife because he says the wife is disobedient, the wife does not listen to me, right? So in that kind of situation, because there is a abuse of power within the relationship, is there is a harmful norm that the husband has internalized, where the husband believes the wife must do everything that I say, and if they do not, I am allowed to punish them or to discipline them through a physical discipline, and they hit them. That would be a form of domestic violence. You could also see domestic violence, and emotional domestic violence, right, could also be in the form of, for example, where um, a parent tells a girl child and says, you are worth less than your brother. I wish that we had a son instead of you, right? So that kind of words or that kind of attack is based upon the girl's gender, and it is something that inflicts emotional violence upon them. So that is how you can see gender-based violence within a domestic setting. Other types of gender-based violence includes child marriage or forced marriage, where girls or below the age of 18 are forced to marry an adult. That would be a form of gender-based violence as well. Human trafficking can also be seen as a form of gender-based violence, especially those who are trafficked into the country for sex work, or and in a lot of instances where women and girls are being trafficked, in the course of being trafficked, they are exposed to sexual violence. That does occur as well. And finally, another example of gender-based violence would be rape. Um, and it is important to note that while the victims of gender-based violence are disproportionately women and girls, meaning that a large number of them are women and girls, you also have victims of gender-based violence who are men and boys as well. So in all the instances that we see here, domestic violence, child marriage, human trafficking, and even rape, the victims could be those from either one of these genders, male or female. All that is important is that violence is being inflicted, and that the violence is inflicted upon them due to gender equality and based upon their gender. So the message that we would like for you to take back is that if you or someone you know needs gender-based violence assistance, you can contact one of UNHCR's partners, and we will show you some of those partners in a little bit. But where you can find information about this, more information about gender-based violence or our partners, is on the Refugee Malaysia website. So when you go to Refugee Malaysia and under the tab of support, as you can see here on the screen, um, it will bring you to the gender-based violence page, which will give you more information. And if you want to have a look at more information right now, you can scan this. Although I would suggest maybe paying attention to this particular presentation till the end, and you can go to the website once this is done. So, what are the kinds of support that can be provided to victims of gender-based violence? Now, one very important pillar of support is health. So, if especially if the person has uh, been inflicted with physical harm due to gender-based violence, you can imagine like in domestic violence situation where somebody has been beaten or kicked, or in a situation even of like rape or sexual assault, there they might require health services, and so health support is really important for them. Psychosocial services is another one that is really important, because for a lot of gender-based violence, the trauma that the gender-based violence survivors, the trauma which they have been inflicted upon them, is not merely just physical in nature, but also leaves a lot of psychological or emotional trauma, which can continue long after the gender-based violence incident has occurred. And so psychosocial support or psychosocial services are really crucial. You also have safety and security services. These could be such as reaching out to government agencies such as the police or JKM, the welfare office, for support. So domestic violence survivors can actually reach out to both the police or to welfare to get support from them. We can also extend to NGOs that provide safety and security services. For example, NGOs that provide shelter to victims of domestic violence that need somewhere safe to go to. And there's also legal assistance. So legal assistance would especially be important in situations where a victim decides to take criminal action against or initiate a criminal investigation against the person who has harmed them, right? So when a person makes a police report and says, this person has been inflicting domestic violence upon me for the past 5 years, or this person raped me yesterday, right? When you go to the police and you make a report like that, a police investigation will be initiated. The police will investigate the case, and if the person is found, if there's enough evidence to be found against the person who's been accused, then the deputy public prosecutor will bring a court case against them. So there's a criminal proceeding, and in those kind of situations, the victim would most likely require legal assistance to guide them through the court process, making sure that their rights are upheld in court, that they receive the kind of assistance that is due to them in the courtroom. So these are the different kind of support that can be provided to victims of not domestic violence, but victims of gender-based violence. Now, I will talk a little bit about the partners that UNHCR works together with on gender-based violence. There are two main ones, which are, as you can see on the screen, Women's Aid Organization, or WAO, or the International Catholic Migration Commission, ICMC. Now, WAO and ICMC provide what is known as gender-based violence case management. Case management is a system where a caseworker will, will work together with the victim of gender-based violence. So the victim comes to this case management agencies and says, I want case management. The caseworker will sit down with them, assess their condition, and then look into what kind of services or support is required for them. So it's a holistic kind of assistance that's being provided to the victim to make sure that they get the support that they need. This is not limited just to those case management agencies themselves. So, for example, um, ICMC might not run their own shelter, so they don't have their own shelter. But if they are through the course of case management, they find that a survivor requires or victim requires a shelter, they can then link them with different partners who might be able to provide shelter or maybe community-based placement for them. So case management is this holistic approach towards assisting survivors or victims, looking into how they can provide them with support either directly through the organization themselves or by linking them to different service providers or partners who can provide that kind of support. When you see what you will see next is really where they are located and the kind of services that they provide. So WAO are based here in the Klang Valley. That's physically where they are located. But when you look at their contact that is shown here on the screen, these contacts can be called or can be reached throughout Malaysia. And the kind of services that they provide are case management. They can assist with making police reports and connecting with medical aid, mental health support, and providing shelter. Now, the contacts that you see on the screen, these are the operating hours for WAO. To call them, you can call them directly on the hotline. And from Monday to Friday, they operate from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And on weekends, they operate from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. They also have a WhatsApp service which can be reached 24 hours. ICMC, on the other hand, have a physical presence here in the Klang Valley as well as in Penang. And they also assist cases that are up north in Perak and Kedah. The operating hours are from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Throughout the week. The different kind of services that they provide include case management, mental health and psychosocial support, shelter, and then referral on to appropriate services. You will see here on the screen, these are the different contexts which they can be reached at. They have different hotlines for different areas as well as people speaking different languages. So, for example, if you're in the Klang Valley and you speak Burmese, Rohingya, or English, the hotline that you would call is the 010-421-1274. Whereas if you are speaking those same languages but in Penang, you would call 014-240-0191. And so on for the rest of them as well. I believe for the other two languages, it doesn't depend on where you are geographically, but you can just call those two numbers. And they have an email by which you can reach them as well. So these are the partners that UNHCR works with. We work alongside them. Um, and if cases or if anybody who has suffered gender-based violence or refugees, asylum seekers, they can reach out to these two partners for assistance, especially for case management. Now, let's say for yourself, practically speaking, if you identify a case of gender-based violence, what are the steps that you can take? Say someone comes to you, your neighbor, a family member comes and says, I have suffered a form of gender-based violence. Maybe your neighbor tells you that they have been beaten by their husband, right? What is it practically that you can do? So what are the things that we can say? So firstly, we want to make them feel safe, make sure that they understand that when they are speaking to you, that this is a judgment-free zone. So some of the words that we can use include telling them, well, thank you for telling me about the situation and difficulties you have faced. Or you can say, I'm sorry to hear that you had to experience that. No one deserves to go through what you went through. We want to make sure that they understand that we are listening to them, that we empathize with what they have undergone, and also acknowledging that it is difficult for somebody to share or talk about something like this. So making sure that they feel safe when they are speaking to you. Next, we can then share with them information on available services. So as we have seen in the previous slides, where you have different partners that are working on gender-based violence, you can tell them, I can share with you that UNHCR works with a few partner organizations who are trained to help people who have suffered what you have suffered, and here is how you can reach them. And then you can show them that information from the website. So if once somebody has revealed to you that they have suffered from gender-based violence, what you want to do first is to make sure, in addition to making sure that they feel safe as they are speaking to you, making sure that the both of you are in a safe space so that they are physically safe as well as feeling emotionally supported to be able to continue to talk to you about this situation. Inform them about the organizations that can provide them assistance. And then what you can do is that you can share to them the number so that they can call themselves. You can tell them, look, this is ICMC's number or this WO's number. You can call them. Um, and what we would suggest is, especially if it is evident that the person who is the victim is going to be returning to a dangerous situation, that maybe that this number is not safe as ICMC or WAO in their phones, or if it's written down that you don't write there WAO or ICMC, but rather just to save the number under a different name, something that the person can remember, or if it's written down, just have the number and then keep kept in their wallet or something somewhere safe, so that if they return to an unsafe situation and the person who is committing the violence finds that number, they won't be looking at it and oh, I know that you have talked to somebody about this gender-based violence, or I know you have talked to somebody about me hitting you, or whatever it is, the violence that they have inflicted. Because what can happen then is that this can cause further harm, or greater risk to that person. So be careful when we share this number, for them to call the services themselves. Um, that is one way that we can do that. So if they say that, okay, I would like to reach out to them and I can call them, these are some maybe practical things that you can do. Give them the number to save on their phone or write it down somewhere. Just remember that maybe when saving it or writing down, change the name of the organization, or don't put a name down, so that if especially if they are going back into a situation which may be dangerous to them. Or secondly, if the person needs help, but is unable to get in touch with the organization, you can ask for their consent. Is it okay if I call them on your behalf, right? If I reach out to them on your behalf, and if they say yes, then we contact the organization. Now, consent is very important. Making sure that you run through with them and say, "Hey, the thing that you have told me, the incident you have told me, is it okay if I tell it to the case management agency? Is it okay if I tell it to one of UNHCR's partner organization?" You want to do that because this person has trusted you with this information, and you don't want to break their trust by telling other people without informing them first. So just make sure you get their consent, and this is really important when it comes to the issue of privacy. When somebody has trusted you with this information, even though you think that you can do some good by connecting them with people who can help them, always make sure that the person who has shared this information with you is aware of it and has consented, has agreed for you to share that information. Because if not, it can be a severe breach of trust for the person who has revealed this information to you. They are in a vulnerable state, and you don't want to breach the trust. So if at the bottom of the screen, you can see in red there, it says that if a gender-based violence victim is injured, you can take them to the one-stop crisis center. One-stop crisis centers, or OSCCs, are departments that are set up or a sub-department that is set up within the emergency departments of government hospitals. And this is really important. They are not available in every single hospital. So private hospitals do not have OSCC. It's just government hospitals. There in the emergency departments, they can provide especially medical assistance to gender-based violence victims, as well as linking them up to the other services like the police, or if they require, further medical assistance or even counseling and psychosocial support, the OSCC can do that. However, in some situations, what a gender-based violence victim might want to do is that they might want to make a police report first before going to the OSCC. So if they want to do that, it is up to them. But if you see that they have suffered from injuries, or are still displaying harm inflicted on them by gender-based violence, you can bring them to the government hospitals to get assistance from the OSCC. And that's really all that I have for today's presentation. I'm now opening up for maybe any questions that we might have from the attendees.